That's it. The place where the remnants of the Black Sea Fleet of the Russian Federation were evacuated, which is already underwater, not the Black Sea, is bulging. Putin plans to talk with Jinping, and also with Recep Tayyip Erdogan. It is obvious that today he will beg. How effective and for whom was the visit of Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of the Ugra region, to Ukraine, and that it is Trump who wants to dispose of our territories again. No one will allow him to do this. We will talk about this and more just now, not only talk, but also analyze. Irina Uzlova is my name. Traditionally, every day is with us. Boris Tizenghausen, Polytechnician. Boris, hello, glad to see you. Glory to Ukraine.
Glory to the heroes.
Now let's listen to the sounds that soothe not only the ear, but also the soul. Please. Fine. Do you know what it is? And this is the Novorossiysk port. That's how it is. They hid, but it didn't work out. Who did not hide? I am not to blame, our special services said, and they, obviously, did not hide, because they thought that they would be safe there, and we warned the Russian occupiers. The mayor of Novorossiysk, Andrusha Kravchenko, admits that a siren is sounding in Novorossiysk, a signal attention everyone. We repel the attack of unmanned boats. Local publics also reported this and said that they heard explosions. The authorities asked local residents not to approach the windows, to hide in a room whose windows do not overlook the sea. Just like that, at about 3.16 there was a traffic closure. Kravchenko announced it in the area of the embankment from Izeva Street to Alexino. Later it was reported that the entrances to the beaches and the embankment were blocked under the escort of an inspection of the water area and the bay. What were they looking for? I wonder if it's yesterday or something? We see that the Russians have dragged them to the port of Novorossiysk. They wanted to hide their ships, but we will get them everywhere. And what should we understand about the scale, spectrum and vector of where unmanned drones reach, and where to run now, to Okamchura?
Yes, I noticed that this event coincided with the fact that the attack by unmanned boats coincided with the fact that the Russian ships left the Sea of Azov, where they felt relatively safe from unmanned boats, because they had pulled a dozen barges, booms, in general, were sitting in the Sea of Azov.
Именно безэкипажных катеров, потому что они же там натянули там уже с десяток барж, гоновые заграждения, ну в общем сидели там в Азовском.
They conducted some kind of exercises, even a couple of times we were fired at with calibers from there. And so these ships got out, passed under the Kerch Bridge and headed for Novorossiysk. They were either already in Novorossiysk or some of the ships were on the way, and now it happened. But judging by the fact that the attack was on the port, they were already there in the bay somewhere, because the targets, in fact, were probably the ships. I noticed that you were right, Irina, that they forbade the residents of Novorossiysk to visit the beaches and the embankment from 9 in the morning, so that, God forbid, they would not see or photograph anything with their eyes. And at night I was not too lazy to get into the comments of local publics. And there they broadcast where on which streets it exploded, why it smelled so bad, why that. There were several explosions. There they shouted at each other to delete, now everyone will understand. Specifically, the streets where traffic was blocked at all were named. Why are traffic blocked on the street after the attack? So that no one records the results of the work of drones from a convenient point, in this case, BEC's unmanned boats. That is, I think that now the sun has dissipated, risen, and whether you forbid it or not, someone will still merge, the satellite will show and so on. Let's see where we got to. But the very fact that we swam all the way there, to Novorossiysk. By the way, I once talked with a person involved in one of the types of boats. He says that Novorossiysk is one of the most inconvenient bays to enter. If you look at the map, it is also covered, and there are also several rows of booms. That is, it is extremely difficult for BECs to penetrate there. If they get there, then this is probably 90% of success. It is important to understand here, they show this NASA map on fires, the red squares are the centers where the temperature is recorded by the satellite. There is one of the squares, it is constant, because high temperature processes take place in the port there. And the second one will now determine what kind of interesting square it is, and it burned there for quite a long time. Therefore, we expect more accurate information, but you should have seen what panic they had in these chats, in the comments.
And which one?
Yes, they thought that then it flew into the port, only then there were airplanes. And it seemed to end there. Probably there, if they don't hit the port. No, they will hit the port. And they wrote that, probably, in the morning all the vacationers from here will run away. Well, look, they fled from the Crimea, they will flee from Novorossiysk. How many more of them are there now? Russia has 7 ports on the Black Sea. On their already mainland, Anapa is there, and so on. Now the BECs are also sailing there, drones will arrive, they will run as fast as they run. Although Russians have an amazing mindset of thought processes or imitation of thought processes, they will still come to Crimea. This is a mystery of nature. Maybe this is from the series, you know, I still found a little bit of the Soviet era there. And for some reason I remembered this story about salt. In short, the woman was there, her whole family was dying, and she was slurping soup. She is asked, how is that? Why do you eat? How is your appetite in general? And she says, it's salty. Well, salt is expensive. Why should the product be wasted? It seems to me that the Russians are the same with vouchers, so paid, let's go, we need to roll the children out, suddenly we will be lucky and a rocket will not arrive, and not lucky, so Putin said, we are immediately in paradise. It seems to me that they have such a process.
Yes, it may not come. It turns out that in Crimea and Rus they were baptized for Putin's version. And not only Crimea, it's just how sacred Putin has been presenting these 11 years, and Novorossiysk is sacred, and everywhere is sacred, where Putin thinks. Once they say, let's quote, not without well-known, but without glorious ones, we have not yet begun this. Wait, it will be, this is my favorite rubric will never stop. Putin, I don't know why, but he came to meet with Xi Jinping. As I remember Aslanyan again, necessity drove him, it seems to me, here too. Putin arrived in Kazakhstan for the SCO summit. This is what his trips look like, which have nothing to do with normal civilization society. Putin travels only where he cannot, I recall, arrest him. 123 countries of the world that have ratified the Rome Statute, respectively, according to which and on the order of the International Criminal Court from March 2017 to 2023, Putin can be arrested in more than 100 countries around the world. He came to Kazakhstan, to Astana, to participate in the summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Putin plans to meet there with Chinese leader Xi Jinping, whom he met for the first time in Astana. The children met me, said good afternoon, dear grandfather. Xi Jinping was very happy about this and asked them to study at Chinese universities. For some reason, it was funny. Xi Jinping will speak with Putin. Will he urge him to do something? Hardly, but he can say that it is enough to snuff with his nuclear bells, and, perhaps, he will discuss the opposite, help in circumventing sanctions, and, perhaps, also the fact that, as Bloomberg tells us, China will develop drones for Russia based on the model of the Iranian Shahd. What is going on in general? What are these drones? Maybe it is necessary to impose some sanctions, if there is evidence? Why will Putin meet with Xi Jinping? Will he beg for something or just want to talk?
The summit and in general, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, in fact, China, was founded to promote this large Chinese project, the global project, One Belt, One Road, infrastructure project. It is clear that Iran is there, it is clear that Lukashenko was running on his hind legs, asking the SCO to be accepted. It seems that now at this summit he was supposed to be accepted, but for him, as they say, our favorite rubric, knife in the dog, happened, and they spoiled his mood a little. Andrzej Duda flew to Beijing, said that if Lukashenko nightmares the border with Putin migrants, then Chinese transit from Belarus will not go anywhere, it will remain in Belarus. And Lukashenko was forced to go out in public yesterday. Of course, he coincided with the events there. He even postponed the speech a little and made a number of extremely important statements. The first thing that we have nothing to do with it at all is that migrants are not ours, they are all Poles. He made excuses as best he could, made a statement that they could not stop migrants. But you and I understand that Putin is kicking him on the one hand and Xi Jinping on the other. If Chinese transit is closed now, then Lukashenko will have big problems. And in general, he said in plain text that some people went there, snitched in China and put spokes in our wheels. So this time, perhaps, the admission of Belarus to the SCO is postponed, but this is how it is. As for cooperation with China, information about the drone, in principle, what is the point? These drones, which I think they call Sunflow or Sunflower, I don't remember. In general, China can produce a lot of these drones.
Вот эти беспилотники, их Китай может много очень производить.
Faster than Russia produces Shaheds, of course, because Russia probably only has a core to assemble Shaheds. Everything else, stuffing, microcircuits, the engine even have to be taken out somewhere. Therefore, China has all this. But if this information is confirmed, then that's it. China can count on fairly tough sanctions, but so far we see that they are flirting with China, to be honest. So, they frighten it. Remember the statement when the British Defence Secretary said, "We have evidence that China is supplying weapons." The United States says, no, there is no evidence. So microchips and used machines for cutting metal, for processing metal, on which Russia rivets weapons and rocket fuel. Is Putin doing this purely for refrigerators, buying from China? Therefore, these games with China, in this case, I am in great solidarity with. It may seem strange against the background of recent statements, with Trump supporters who say what he is saying there. Look at how he beat up trade restrictions on China, Iran, North Korea, they could not breathe there. And on the other hand, we can say beautifully, we will impose sanctions. 5 Chinese companies will be driven under sanctions, but in fact, the volume of trade between Russia and China is increasing from year to year. In general, not noticing these things, it seems to me that it is clear that Europe, the European Union and the United States are first and second in terms of trade with China, in terms of trade turnover. We understand what interests are there. Now they have pinned down a little on electric cars, for some reason, on medical equipment. But this is all a drop in the ocean. That is, no one has yet imposed serious sanctions against China for circumvention, although the grounds have probably existed for a long time.
Yes, a refrigerator in every home. A new promotion on the territory of the Russian Federation. Of course not. And U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken came out last week at a press conference with Stoltenberg. He also said 90% of workbenches, 70% of microelectronics, all this is with China. Well, he said it and went out. As we have already remembered Trump. But, of course, there is something else that cannot but worry. Politico writes that Trump's plan does not include the expansion of NATO to the east, and the intention to leave Putin part of the Ukrainian territories. As if Trump is conducting the same type of negotiations with Putin, about how much Ukrainian territory Moscow can keep. That's according to 2 of Trump's former national security men, who may be working during his second line. Which he might potentially have, at least he really wants, an ex who wants to become next. I have said this 1555 times, but nevertheless, these plans do not change in Trump. According to this publication of Politico, Trump is considering a treaty beyond which NATO will not expand to the east. In particular, Ukraine and Georgia should not become members of the North Atlantic Alliance. And even more, Boris and our viewers, he is negotiating with Putin about how much Ukrainian territory Moscow can keep. And what is this? It's somehow not very invested in our hopes for Trump, that we said that he could come, give us all the weapons, and we would win. Or he or his advisors can really negotiate with the Kremlin, and this scenario does not suit us in any way. The head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, Andriy Yermak, commenting on the previous information, the publication voiced by Trump at the debate, said that we will not make any compromise with Russia. Ukraine will not give up any territories.
Let's put it this way. Any material in the Western media, in the American, in European, is now an instrument of political warfare, especially since we understand that the election race in the United States is about to start with might and main, and Trump wants to surrender territory, Biden is in poor health, and we will see more and more such publications the closer to November 5th to this election date.
Вот-вот стартанет вовсю просто избирательная гонка в США, и там Трамп хочет сдать территорию, Байдена плохо со здоровьем, но и таких публикаций, чем ближе к 5 ноября, к дате выборов, мы будем видеть.
Therefore, I do not rule out that Trump discussed one of these options. I do not rule it out. But let me remind you, Trump has not done this yet, but with the tacit consent of Ukraine, territory was taken away from Ukraine. I'm talking about Crimea now. And what happened after that? The United States slammed an iron fist on the table and said, we will return this territory, let's impose hellish sanctions against Russia. No. Therefore, I do not rule out that Trump is considering this option. Father, can Trump solve this without us at all? I don't think so. But can he make it so that this will be solved without us? I think so. Remember how powerful Trump's influence was on Republicans when the adoption of the aid package was delayed. And he was not the president. Can Trump, as president, drag it out at all so that we will not wait for 6 months, but will wait indefinitely? He has a tremendous influence on the Republicans. Of course, it can. Therefore, plus not allocating the PDA there, where he himself can do it without Congress, can Europe compensate for what is allocated to us by the United States? I don't think. If you look at the total volume, according to the bilateral agreements that we have concluded, if you put everything together, there will not be 60 billion. In addition, they will need another 60 billion, those with the United States, but if assistance to Ukraine decreases, will we be able to successfully advance and take away, return, liberate our territories to the borders of 1991? If we have even fewer weapons than we have now, can we do it? I doubt it very much. That's the point. In order for Ukraine not to give up a single piece of its land, Ukraine must receive some weapons, and many times more, which we are now receiving. This is realistic. If Putin is in some agreements, when Trump becomes president, Putin will throw Trump, and then another scenario will come. They will say, I will give Ukraine so much to punish this bastard. This is a possible scenario. Therefore, we all want to completely cleanse our entire territory of this filth, of this rottenness. But is it possible to do this with the tools that we have now? This is what you need to think about. Yes, we can say that we will never give it up. It is, sooner or later we will return all our territories and perhaps even a little more, but now in these realities it is extremely difficult to do. It borders on the impossible.
For us, I believe that the impossible will indeed be a reality, and we will take back every piece of our land. Boris, we have a minute, unfortunately, but I can't help but ask you about the fact that we still need more weapons. President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky also spoke yesterday to Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary, who is unbelievable but true, came to the Ukrainian capital for the first time in 12 years, for the first time during the full-scale invasion. And he says it would also be nice to talk to Putin, and we will tell him that we need weapons. Orban came as an independent player, as a representative of the European Union, which headed the Council of the European Union on July 1st, and on July 2nd he was already in Kyiv, and not in Moscow, which, in principle, is also not bad, as for me. Or is he like Putin's Trojan horse?
No, exclusively. Here the second point is more suitable. He came exclusively in his own interests. Look at the background of what he came. I do not believe that a politician who systematically blocks assistance to Ukraine, blocks sanctions against Russia, has put forward 11 points for us here, which we are working on. These are the sources from Budapest who say that these 11 points that we are working on, about the rights of the Hungarian minority in Transcarpathia, they have become a progress, but the main incentive is that they do not want to be friends with Orban, they do not want to play in the sandbox. He needs unification now. The trio united with the right, but this is not enough. They do not want to unite with him, that is, he was expelled from the previous association, it has not yet happened to the new one. Why? Because of the position on Ukraine. This trip, this point, let's do it as if I'm a peacemaker, a dove of peace, let's freeze, stop shooting, but he didn't insist, many noticed. That is, he came, showed that he had set up a peacekeeping movement, and left. And now it is much more difficult to reproach him for being anti-Ukrainian. And now it is also much more difficult to tell why the 19 billion frozen from the European Union funds should not be given to Hungary. Let me just remind you that around this period, when Orban was here, foreign ministers Sharto and Lavrov were negotiating with each other. The initiator was the Hungarian side. They also talked about their affairs there. Well, in general, what am I talking about? Orban is a very smart, cunning and far-sighted politician. Unfortunately, he is now our opponent. We would like an ally who alone sits on 4 chairs and sabotages the initiatives of the entire European Union there. We would like to have such an ally, and so that it works constructively. But
and the fact that he came to us first, and not in Moscow, in this position of head for 6 months, did not bring us closer in the trajectory of movement from opponent to ally? Isn't it?
No. Pay attention, sooner or later, resting on his legs and arms, Orban still voted for the initiative, for sanctions. But he bargained for a lot of all sorts of goodies on the way of this perseverance.